Hey folks, how's it going? Silent Techie here and welcome back to the channel. So today I've got quite an interesting video for you. This is a Gainwood GTX 590. It's a dual GPU solution released in the first quarter of 2011 and it features two GF110 GPUs, which is basically just two GTX 580s in SLI but on the one PCB. Save space, I guess. So before I chuck it in, let's have a look at this big beast. So it's based on the Fermi architecture, which has been out of support since February of 2019. It also features 3 GB of GDDR5 VRAM, which is 1.5 GB for each GF110 GPU. 1024 CUDA cores, has a core clock of 607 MHz, a memory clock of 1215 MHz. It has 4 outputs, with 3 of them being DVI-I, and one mini display port that I think is 1.2 capable, but I have no way of testing. So considering the age of the card, I think it's probably a good idea if I clean off the thermal paste. Let's get cracking. Lucky I decided to clean this off because this old thermal paste was as solid as a rock. So I'm going to replace this thermal paste and I'm going to use the Noctua NTH1 because I personally feel that it's the best non-conductive thermal interface material that you can get for pretty cheap. And I should probably reassemble the card now. say, looking at this cooler, I'm quite worried about the temps on this thing, considering the small 2 heat sinks with just a single 80mm fan to cool them both. But let's benchmark it to find out. Alright. Before I show you the results, just take notes that despite the lack of the second GPU stats on most of the footage, I thoroughly checked the stats in Afterburner straight afterwards. The FPS you see in the footage is lower than the real stats due to the fact that I had to record this with MSI Afterburner, which took a sizable chunk of CPU usage, because Shadowplay is not supported on GTX 500 series offerings. Right, so let's get to it. So GTA 5. I was genuinely surprised at how well this actually ran GTA 5 at 1080p with a normal preset, I should add. Apart from quality, I couldn't actually really tell the difference between this card and my normal card that I use in my day-to-day system. So with an average FPS of 33 and 1% lows of 32.5, we're getting some really good numbers, and the experience was actually quite pleasurable. Aside from a flicker here and there, which I'm unsure whether that's a memory issue, like on my main system's memory, like RAM, or whether it's to do with the VRAM, or could be just something wrong with my DVI to HDMI cable that I was using. Either way, the experience was quite enjoyable. So for Far Cry 5, well, at least I thought I was going to test Far Cry 5, but I couldn't run it stable. I tried 1080p, 720p, and all ranges in between, resolution, scales, everything. Just wasn't stable. It would run the benchmark and crash, or it wouldn't even run the benchmark and crash. It was just unstable. So unfortunately, I won't be testing that today, but instead we've got the nice game. But instead we've got Assassin's Creed Origins, which is still a pretty fun game. So 1080p for this game was actually a complete no-go, and with an average FPS of 9. Yeah, so after a lot of trial and error, I got it down to 720p with the very low preset, which I should probably have chucked it straight there, but you know, gotta try and push it to the max, right? So at the very low preset, 720p, it was barely tolerable. So at 720p and for the very low preset, it was barely tolerable. Let me explain. So this game doesn't support this specific multi-GPU configuration. So it might support 2 GTX 580s, but it didn't seem to support 2 GTX 580s on the one PCB, or the GTX 590, which was a bit of a shame. So we were only able to utilize the capability of just one of the GF110s. And at the settings above, we got the game close to what could be considered playable, but so we got close to 30 FPS, but I'll let you decide how playable it is. With an average FPS of 24, with 1% lows of 9 and 0.1% lows of 5, respectively, this was barely playable. And enjoying the experience was another thing entirely. So for Red Faction Guerrilla, I decided to go easy on the card this time, playing one of my favourite games, Red Faction Guerrilla. Now this isn't the version from 2009, oh no, we've got the remastered version. Yeah, I know, that's pretty cringy, but hey, we are living in an age where, you know, companies slap super onto the end of their card and boom, performance boost. So, don't judge. Right, back to it. So this was released in 2018 and features several texture reworks and I guess improvements to just some of the graphical qualities that were lacking in the 2009 version. Anyway, so 1080p, the very high preset with anti-aliasing maxed out, we actually got a pretty darn good experience with to a point where the physics of the game was actually causing my CPU to bottleneck, which is quite interesting. So we started from that, as well as a little bit from the 590, but mind you, that was being fully utilized too, so I can't bash on it too hard. Despite these bottlenecks, we actually saw an average FPS of 107, but the 0.1% lows and 0.1% loads were 24 and 3. Yeah. So like I said, it very, very playable. It really didn't dip down that much. It was just a little bit here and there. But yeah, those 1% lows were significant when you just look at the dry stats. So yeah, like I said, my CPU was bottlenecking, especially when I was testing the physics. So in this game, when I was going around smashing things, blowing things up, that's when I'd see the most dips. But I was getting above 60 pretty much most of the time anyway. I didn't really notice the status overly that much, except for, like I just said, the physics. Alright, so now for Far Cry 3, which is in my opinion the second best game in the series, and considering we couldn't test Far Cry 5, I thought, well, might as well get at least one Far Cry in, right? So, on the 590, it was certainly enjoyable. With the Ultra preset at 1080p, we saw an average FPS of 71, with a 1% low of 28 and 0.1% low of 8.8. And again, I'm not happy with the 1% lows, but it was quite playable, achieving the 60 FPS target quite easily. My CPU was actually bottlenecking this game. I'm not sure whether my specific CPU wasn't up to the task, like it's just not fast enough, but either way, it pushed the 590 quite hard, and it gave a pretty good result. I can't really fault it too much. So Battlefield 5. Now I tried to run Battlefield 5, but I couldn't because of this nifty little out-of-date driver issue, which actually told me to update. So yeah, okay, thanks. So instead, let's have a look at Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 was released in 2016, so that's 5 years after the card was first released. I thought I'd be a bit brave or a little bit stupid, probably somewhere in between, and I ran it at the high preset with MSAA 2X. The game actually ran quite well, giving us an average FPS of 47, with 1% lows of 14 and 0.1% lows of 10. So again, not fantastic lows. My CPU was definitely bottlenecking this game. So I do have to update my test bench, unfortunately. But at least we actually got some very good usage out of the 590. And yeah, again, like I said, it played extremely well. Okay, so I couldn't actually believe how well the GTX 590 actually runs in 2019. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this experience of using an old NVIDIA dual GPU solution. It's actually my first time working with a SLI or Crossfire configuration, so that was actually a pretty fun step for me. So, do I recommend it in 2019? Well, not really, because after all, NVIDIA did stop support for it in February of 2019, and of course, so that means no new game optimizations are going to be coming out, and not to mention that the Fermi architecture itself is very hot and very, very inefficient compared to today's standards. Like, for the price that I got this, you could just go and get a used RX 470, 570, and for a little bit extra, maybe a 1060, and just, you know, get better performance out of it, and at a much lower power cost, because this card requires two 8-pin PCIe connectors. Pretty power hungry. So yeah, like I said, it'll give you a better performance at really a lower overall cost. As for the temperatures, it certainly did get hot, but it kept between 68 and 84 degrees Celsius. It was sort of averaging around about 77-ish. Sometimes it dipped below, higher. One game I noticed that it did go really, really hard at was GTA 5. That ran quite warm, and a few of the other games pushed it to its limit. So yeah, it's a little bit high, but for my liking. But the fan wasn't actually that loud, so at the end of the day, it's not that bad. And sorry, AMD, but it's better than the blower style fans, which I just hate. So one thing I do quite like about this card though is the shroud. I quite like the images printed on the shroud, and I feel that it's a bit of a shame that add-in board partners don't do this anymore. Like, I know that it's sort of like old and outdated, but most of the cards these days just look very generic, and they all look virtually like the same, and there's no real, you know, creative differences anymore. They, you know, and I guess the images were an easy way for them to split that up. So anyway. Oh, and before you comment the fact that my CPU is bottlenecking the 590, I do plan to upgrade to the new Ryzen 3000 processors when I can. I actually plan on getting a 3600, might even stretch it to a 3700X. Have to see if my budget allows, but it should, considering how cheap they are. And of course, we've all, or most of us, should have seen the performance of them already, and yeah, they're pretty kick-ass, so that's great. Oh, actually, on a side note, there is a version of the GTX 590 called the Asus ROG Mars 2, which is actually a super rare version of the card. But it's like a GTX 590 on roids. It's freaking powerful. It's beastly. Which even now, because of its rarity, features a hefty price on the used market. I think I last saw one on eBay going to about $500–600, which is crazy because you can get like a 1080 for that, you know. And that, of course, will give you like probably 10 times the performance. But yeah, it's one of those cards that looks nice. And now I'm dribbling on. So thank you for watching. Please leave a like and feel free to comment below. Hit the subscribe button if you want more tech videos coming your way, and I will see you in the next one.